Um, so Simmel was also raised in this tradition of neo-Kantianism that sees a clear distinction between the cultural world and the natural world, with the corresponding epistemologies of, let's say, an historically oriented kind of cultural science and a much more positivistically oriented kind of natural science. While similar as a Kantian generally sided, obviously, with these neo-Kantian distinctions, he also did not want sociology to collapse into just another branch of historiography or historical kind of sciences. So he saw it as something different. And what's crucial, I think, for his understanding, Richard Munt here, whom you read for today, also points to this, are these basically two key notions of his. The so-called Wechselwirkung, so you may translate it as a dialectic of human interactions, on the one hand, and association or forms of social life, Vergesellschaftung in German, on the other hand. You may understand these two notions in analogy to notions that Kant also used. So for Kant, let's say knowledge is generated also on the basis of two sources. On the one hand, you have sort of the empirical observation or just the intuition of some kind, so these chaotic facts that our sensibility produces. On the other hand, we also have certain forms to give shape to all of these different intuitions that our sensibility produces. So for empirical observations, the Kantian forms are obviously time and space. For non-empirical kind of forms, they are different. And so these interactions in Simmel and associations can be read in analogy to the Kantian categories that he uses for the explanation of what generates human knowledge, right? And then Kant's question in the critique of pure reason is how is it possible, right, that we have knowledge about the world? And again, in analogy, Simmel sort of is interested in how it is possible for us to, well, not have knowledge about the world in general, but to have knowledge about the social world, right? So how is sort of the social world and the study of these forms of knowledge in the social world even possible? Right? I mean, to break this down in just one example, imagine, for instance, just you have many kind of interactions in an everyday life setting. So, for instance, dancing, right? In this interaction in dance, you have a constant observation of the other person. If it's when it's a two-person kind of dance, a constant observation, right? There's a mutual observation. And I mean, this is going on dialectically, right? So I adjust in response to your movements, you adjust in response to my movements. And this is meant by this mutual form of interaction, which you notice already is probably a little bit more complicated than a simple causal relationship, right? Where you have a clear sort of time asymmetry of cause and effects, very simplistically, obviously. And this Wechselwirkung is probably very difficult to represent in time-ordered kind of causal relationships. Yeah. So there are these interactions taking place on a dance floor, but then you also have certain forms that crystallize, right? So Think about the different kind of dances there are, yeah, ranging from Argentine tango to swing, which are, yeah, crystallizations, institutions. You may also call these forms of association, which impose a certain order on these different interactions, right? There are certain norms about the order of steps, about the way you act on the dance floor, the act you don't act on the dance floor, etc. So these are crystallized forms of association, and now these two then produce jointly just one form of society. Yeah. Um, and yeah, you probably already gather why Simmel is also called the founder of relational sociology, because obviously this is the very basic building block of society now in Simmel is not the individual anymore, but it is both the interaction and the social form in which this interaction takes place, right? So the dancing and the forms of dance, to put it simply. Well, dance obviously is only just one very, let's say, special form in social life, and sociology takes also a second order observation of all of these forms. Now imagine, so dance in many categories is a dyadic kind of relationship. It takes two to tango, right? Um, there may be other forms in social life that require only two persons. Yeah? So playing chess, for instance. Yeah? Many other forms. This is just one category. Yeah? There are different categories. There are groups of three, for instance, triads. Yeah, famous German card game involves necessarily three people. Um, According to Simmel, it also takes three people or three, let's say, groups to organize competition, right? The two competitors and sort of the third person, the client, for instance, they're competing for. You may even say there's a fourth element, such as the public, so competing for someone, something in front of a certain public, at least when it regards sport competition. In short, like there are different categories of social forms. So sociology then is basically then the study, yeah, of these different categories, but not only, let's say, in a with the purpose of classifying them in different ways, but also to study how they came about, right, historically. So the historical study of social forms were quite important also to Simmel. Yeah. So the basic question then guiding sociology in analogy then to the epistemological question that guided Kant's project in philosophy was, how is it then that society and the study of society, so sociology, is possible? Yeah? With then sociology studying, yeah, sort of the a priori of a society, so the basic forms, categories through which society is made possible. So in short, for something like a dance to happen, you need these interactions, the Wechselwirkung. You need a certain, let's say, social form, yeah, the rules of Argentine tango, for instance, for the dance to happen in. This is through these elements, then society in this very narrow context obviously is made possible, and this is what sociology, sorry, should then study. Yeah. As a result of this kind of studying, sociology develops, if you want, meta forms or certain synthetical categories, again in analogy to this Kantian idea that there are certain sort of categories that can be deduced also about categories that make also knowledge possible. Some of the categories that Simmel then in his sociology came up with is, for instance, imitation, right? A term that we have already encountered as being central in Durkheim's competitor Gabriel Tart's sociology. Competition, I have already mentioned as a particular in Simmel's ideas triadic form, super and subordination for hierarchical kind of relationships. Yes, as simple as that, the dyad or triad, small groups, large groups, and so on. So as one example of this, I wanted to introduce Simmel's thoughts then on groups and also on conflict. So yeah, if you're looking for a thinker who is at the origin of the conflict sociology that resurfaced in the post-Second World War American sociology, then it is again Georg Simmel one can cite. So Simmel makes the very trivial observation that the number of people organized in a group has a significant impact on very many different features of how the group looks like, how it is organized, both positive and negative. So that again, the social form in which these individual gathers, which might be as simple as just the pure number of people organized in the social form, has all kinds of different effects. Yeah. Yeah, a first one, and this is something he highlights in his little essay here on the quantitative aspects of the group, is the larger a group you have, the more it is internally differentiated. And you may also think about this little essay of Simmel's as a description of modern society, right? The modern Berlin of his time when compared to the more traditional society. Simmel is in a way a theorist of social differentiation. That is even a book title of his. So he considers, let's say, the differentiation into different social roles as most characteristic of modern societies. Again, a little bit against the liberal Adam Smithian idea here that it is a pure economically functional division of labor that characterizes modern societies. It's more than this. This is also a social form of, being part, for instance, of a highly specialized profession. Yeah. So the larger the group then also determines the way that identity works. So in the larger groups, for instance, that's what Simmel suggests, the self-understanding of members is less elitist. Yeah, you're faced with a mass of common members, and this influences also the way you understand yourselves. Simmel uses many, let's say, terms that are reminiscent of the natural sciences of the time. He also then thinks about larger group as more inert, where sort of less energies are used, as he says. He also links the size of the group with the kind of ideas or ideology that are dominant in the group. So he sees the larger group size as being linked to less radical ideas. So for the political scientists also amongst you, this could remind you of the Downs theorem of the median voter that parties compete for, and to appeal to the median voter, so sort of the 50% of the population, you won't win the median voter when you propose too radical ideas. Simmel also already had this thought about linking group size then to the kind of ideologies defended in larger groups. He also observes that the larger the group, the more nervous the member's state of mind. This is